Here's what's happening. People see problems forming. They have an inner knowing of what is happening and how to solve it, but they can't do anything with it until they have proof, hard data. So today we unpack when data is important and when leaning into your intuition or sensing the problem is actually much better for all of us. Welcome to Brave Proximity, the space where leaders and changemakers finally exhale, tell the truth, and get the validation they rarely receive. This is not a how-to podcast. This is not motivational wallpaper or corporate comfort language. Here, the messy, is it just me? Moments become turning points. I'm Marissa Green.
I'm Susan Page, and we are futurists and practitioners who have spent decades inside turbulence, helping leaders who care deeply navigate culture, crisis, egos, expectations, and everything in between. We've seen the gap between what leaders and changemakers feel and what they're allowed to say. Brave Proximity is a place to close that gap. Each episode starts with the elephant in the room, often disguised as a pet peeve, and we follow it to the deeper truth underneath. We do not just talk about leadership, we get close to what leadership actually feels like.
Waiting for perfect data is how obvious problems spiral out of control inside organizations. I don't know, Susan, how many underlying issues can you see plain as day, but then you need to take 3 more weeks just to find and source the data to back it up?
Okay, this is going to be self-promotion, but I'm just going to say it is I am spectacular at spotting signals, early signals detection.
You can see them coming a mile away.
I can see them coming a mile away. And if one more person says, but we need data for that, some of these I'm just like, you know what? I mean, not to be a jerk, but like, go fuck yourself. That's how I feel is, how are you not seeing it? So I want to get the elephant on the table right away is I believe right now that data has become a way to put off decisions, to not address some of the most obvious things, to shirk responsibility. And I'm going to tell you right now, not every observation needs data.
I would agree. There needs to be more of a way to feel like data even when it's an observation.
Yes.
That anecdotal evidence, the focus groups. I can't tell you how many times we have done engagement surveys that give us, you've read engagement surveys before.
I'm reading them now all the time.
Exactly. They ask one very specific question. You aggregate a heap of data. And again, it goes back to where are you going to put your telescope lens?
Yes.
What are you going to pay attention to? And anytime that I put engagement data in front of a leader and tried to get it to move the needle of action, it never worked.
No.
It never worked because they would just pinpoint the data that they wanted to see.
Who said that comment?
Exactly. Or they'd try to find out the people who didn't like them or didn't have something positive to say. The focus would be wrong. But I kid you not, every time that we have done focus groups or interviews and aggregated those anecdotes from people, that's where you get the real meat of the issue. Your engagement survey is not going to tell you how to change the culture, but your people will.
Yes.
If you will listen. But I think the trick is, and we'll talk about the shift later, the trick is trying to figure out how you make that anecdotal evidence, how you make intuition, how you make seeing something coming feel like real evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think we need to stop whitewashing data too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of confirmation that happens. I feel really lucky to have some brilliant data scientists and behavioralists, who have taught me a lot in my career and even recently. And it's funny because I would come to them and I would say, why are we asking that question and not this question?
Right.
Well, the organization isn't ready for that
yet.
And why do you got to be ready for the truth? I mean, if it's sitting there, it's not going to get better. And so I know there is an art and a science to asking the right questions, but let's stop confirming our bias and let's be open to opening the book. We will not have all the answers, but that's also the beauty of having 10,000 employees or even 5,000 or 500 is you have beautiful minds that want to help support a solution.
I agree. And I think we're talking about this right now in the context of engagement and culture and how do you drive an organization forward. But the same can be true for the business as well.
Absolutely.
And, business relies on a lot of data to make really critical decisions. And that's not wrong. We're not saying no data ever. But what we're also saying is, how do you get proximate to the people who actually know? So whether that's customer-centered design, whether that's asking the employees on the front lines. Like, when was the last time that you've heard of an organization that went and asked their call center employees
Right.
to tell them what their customers want?
Yes.
It doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often. And this is part of it. Yes, you need data, but you also need people willing to have their eyes open and observing what's coming.
Yeah.
And then we need to trust that there is a knowing and an essence to how we make decisions and what is actually needed. You've got to find the mix of both.
I think if we start to objectify, there is something about intuition. There is something, especially like with practitioners who have done work for a really long time, is you can start spotting these signals. We are moving at a pace in business that is way too fast to even spend like a week and a half. And that is a week and a half of 3 people scrubbing data all day long.
Exactly.
Stop doing that. If you have a hypothesis, test it in an efficient way. But I'm going back to what you just said, and I know we're toggling between signals and being able to use data across the business. When I became head of employee experience in a role, I called and I just made an attempt, and I called somebody who I really admired, who was head of employee experience at a very large company, and he answered my message. Believe it or not, he even said to me,
"That's brave proximity. Good job."
He even said to me, he goes, "I don't know why I answered your message because I get like 50 of these a month." He goes, "But just something inside of you." I said, "I'm going to answer it." And you know what he said to me? He goes, "Susan, you don't even need a survey platform because you could talk to every single person in that company once a quarter. And that is your data." But I go back to what you're saying is we do not even tap into people that could be our data source.
Right.
We're mining dashboards, maybe creating a study. And if you're creating a study or a survey, do it for the right reasons.
Yes, do it for the right reasons. I feel like, too, there's also then what happens with the data.
Yes.
Right? So there's the idea that we need to supplement our quantitative data with qualitative or more intuitive sensing. There's also the idea that you get a data point. Somebody zeroes in on like this one data point, and it creates a wave of all of these new programs or initiatives that need to be created to solve this one data point that was misused originally. And to me, that's all about ensuring that you're not only looking at data, you're gathering insights to drive your decisions. That's where strategy lives.
Yes.
And there is room in insights for the more intuitive sensing and knowing. And I love what you were saying about build a hypothesis.
Yes.
Build a hypothesis and test it. We do this all the time in our consulting work because let's also face it, you don't have hours and hours and weeks to gather as much data as you could possibly know to pinpoint the exact decision that needs to be made.
Yes.
You have to move fast. Second, we do it because we don't have capacity to talk to every person in the organization. No. We can only pressure test a few things, and you can build really great strategic programs on a hypothesis that you have tested with insight and data, and then you test it.
Yes.
You don't roll it out to the whole organization right away, because here's what happens when you follow that typical pathway. If it's like the standard today, if we were to like lay it on the table how it gets done, it is, I'm going to gather 3 to 4 weeks worth of data where I have 18 people mining the dashboards, right? I'm maybe going to do a couple of insights, maybe not. I'm going to share it with some leaders. They're going to pick the things that are their favorite or their pet peeves. You're going to build entire programs around it. Those programs are going to take you probably 6 months to build.
And a little bit of tens of thousands of revenue.
Exactly. You're going to spend a lot of money building programs that are going to take you 6 months to roll out. So now we're like 8 months into this process, and you're rolling something out that's no longer relevant. Because
it wasn't even relevant in the first place.
It might not have been relevant in the first place, but definitely at the pace of change in companies today, it is absolutely not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And this is where this data mining and the idea of perfect decision making is really going to hold a lot of organizations back if they don't start leaning into all of this great expertise and wealth of knowledge that they have at the top of the organization, but also deep in the
Yes,
organization.
at all levels of the
At all
organization.
levels, that's going to become the differentiator in the future of work between the
Yeah.
organizations that can move at the pace of change and those that get stuck.
Okay, I have two things to say. What about the naysayers that are like, don't ask them because then it becomes a problem. And it's like, what?
They've got their rosy colored
I
glasses on and
know,
they just
I
don't want to
know.
know.
And
I don't know.
I think people do not like. Let's become better at thinking about. There is an art to this of
Yes.
finding the right people. Not everybody's going to go say they asked me why I'm not using an AI tool. They're going to fire me. Not
Right.
everybody goes there. And so it's the way that you set it up. And it goes back to the culture of the organization is if you are an organization where you're like, we're going to be wholly transparent and we're going to ask the questions that need to be asked, as long as you're doing something with it. It could be one thing, and it should be one thing. It shouldn't be eight things.
It should be one thing, but it should be the most important
The most
thing.
important thing.
And the only way you actually really understand that is, again, to get inside and underneath what the data are telling us, or to go and start asking people the more curious questions to peel back the layers. I learned this like really difficult lesson when I was in charge of engagement surveys. And I and my team, we would spend so much time focused on the survey itself, the questions, how were we going to cut the data, prepping leaders to read their reports, building the dashboards, like all of the things. And I remember we had a new leader come into the organization and I was like, so excited. I'm like, yes, we're going to show them everything there is about this organization. Right. And I was so focused on the data that my executive summary for the data was literally like a bullet point list of data points. It was like 8% of people believe bop, 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 and 5% of people believe dot, dot, dot. And she like took one look at this first draft and she was like, okay, because she already knew this about insights and sensing and like pulling out the other pieces. And she was like, we're going to start again. And I remember the poor thing, because this was like 12 years ago. And she's like, she had to like really get me to see things differently, to understand that it wasn't about the data.
Yeah.
It was about the insight that we were gleaning.
What story was it telling?
What story was it telling? And she was the first person to really give me permission to start bringing in what I knew to be true about the organization already. And it was risky because there were certain things that didn't show up plain as day in the engagement survey, but ended up at least getting a conversation point in the executive room just because we knew we were hearing it from employees. And that was the first time, especially in business, because I've always had that more intuitive skill set. But you know how it's like people who are psychic but don't know it until they're 40 or 50 because their whole life they were told to turn it off.
Yes.
This is kind of the same. Like your whole professional life, you're told data, data, data. So your focus becomes data. And then you're finally given permission to like share something that you observe and know.
Yeah.
Then the floodgates open.
Yes.
And you're like, fuck the data.
Well, and I think that you're just saying something super important that goes across capabilities too, is lean into people's superpowers. Don't suppress it. If you see something and you see it adding value and it is not a traditional competency that's on something, that is more than okay. Like we become so focused on certain aspects of what competencies does somebody need. I'll tell you right now, if I had somebody on my team that had good intuition and it was playing out, I would be like, go to that person.
Yes.
Go to that person. But you also said something to me that was really powerful, is that leader must have known something because they actually talked to people.
Right.
They asked questions. They were curious. And we do not have to wait to get a data set or a dashboard to get answers.
Well, and let's just talk about that for a minute. I think that this is the case, other than organizations that have invested in a true like dashboard that's updated like by the minute, and not many organizations have that. by the time any of these reports get out, let's even just talk about quarterly results.
Yes.
So many organizations have these old school structures for how they deliver their quarterly results and I'm not talking about to the street or the
Business reviews.
Yes, business reviews, these long meetings that take an entire day where
Or
all your
2.
VPs,
Yes.
their time is taken up to sit and literally look at a bunch of data points, which fair, the results are important.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they aren't, but what I'm saying is when you're reviewing those results in October, when your year closed out in July,
Right.
it's October. We're already supposed to be thinking about January
know.
by that point.
I know.
We have missed the boat. And
Yeah.
not only that, but there's all the pomp and circumstance that goes into creating the reports and trying to derive some insights from it. It's a bunch of swirl. It's busy work happening in the organization.
It is a lot of busy work. And I go back to like what were people hired for too.
Yes.
And we're kind of getting to the part where we've talked a lot about it. Like let's kind of reframe it and think about it. And we talked a little bit about this is if you've got people that are really good listeners, you've got people that can make connection with the business and for in any space. There's people that are really good at asking really good questions.
Yes.
Lean into them. Don't wait for a JD for somebody on your team. Think about creative ways that you can gather insight without giving a survey, or if you are doing a survey or a study to uncover something, make it meaningful.
Yeah.
Ask the hard questions. That we are going to need that data to be able to make decisions and movements at the pace of change that is required right now. We can no longer sit on things.
We can no longer sit on it. And I actually think this is going to become an emerging, really critical skill set for leaders in organizations. So leaders in organizations historically have not been pushed to be entrepreneurial. They've been pushed to deliver on a very specific set of results that they're sort of, told through a strategy to go after. Right. But in this pace of change and what's about to happen with the quickness of what will be going on around us externally.
Even what consumers want.
But it is all going to be happening to the business,
yes.
right? There are going to be all of these pressures from the market that leaders, if they only have their eye on what they've been told.
Yes.
And they don't have their eyes open to what's coming and using their 25, 30, however many years of experience and expertise to start sensing where the market is going, they are already too late.
Yeah.
And I think as HR leaders and for organizations looking at the skill sets that they actually need, so many people are still building leadership programs around how to manage people, which I know. Obviously, close proximity. We care about their brave proximity. We care about that a lot. But also, we need to start engaging our leaders to start building this other muscle of what they sense and see coming to not use data as the primary reliance for making a decision, but to use data to pressure test that hypothesis.
Yeah, it's almost like an augmenter. We forget we have judgment? Like, I mean, you're looking at me, you're like, she's got a lot of judgment. And I'll be super honest about it. And I also have the tools to help myself and to help others. But I go back to is we have an over-reliance on data at this point. And that is normal when, trends come in and things swing certain ways. And there's certain stakeholders in the company that want less subjective, information. But I will tell you is that subjective information is do not look away. It is early signals of things that are coming and use data to augment it if you can. But if you do not have time and you need to surface something, leaders, allow testing space.
Yeah. I mean, put it out there. Let it start happening. Let the experience be the data.
Yes. Stop shutting people down.
Exactly. Move quicker to make a decision based on the limited insight that you have and coach your teams to be in a space of being willing to come forward. Again, it's kind of like back to the messenger element, the truths in the room. Create more space for people to tell you what they really think sits behind the data. And I love this so much because in my personal life, I'm getting so interested in what are the skills that my kids are going to need to know and understand for this future of work,
Yeah.
right? We're going to kind of live through the shift and change,
Mhm.
but they are going to be emerging and walking out into an
Fresh.
entirely, yes, a fresh new way of working. And judgment, reasoning,
Yes.
critical thinking,
Yes.
pressure testing, sensing, intuition, empathy, those are the skill sets of the future.
Yeah.
And that is a big shift for a lot of leaders. And data is like one way of kind of getting into that conversation and opening it up.
Yeah.
But like, I am not teaching my kids how to read charts and only do math in
Right.
the old school ways. I'm teaching them how to look at a problem and see and sense and ask curious questions and
Yeah.
understand, like little investigators.
Oh,
Figure out
yes.
figure out what's coming, and I won't say that to a leader. You could be a, an adult investigator.
Right.
Like, you don't have
Right.
to be a little one, but
But it does, you're absolutely right, it takes a different skill set. Now, I do think
Mhm.
people that have spent time in HR or in people and culture roles or even communications are more attuned to it, but we need that from all leaders. And
Mhm.
so it is going to be a stretch. And we're going to talk a little bit about development in a later podcast and what that looks like. But I think we are going to have to disrupt the whole development
Oh,
ecosystem
yeah.
as well. I want
100%.
to say this too, because we talked about, inaction versus action. I was looking at something recently that talked about during COVID, the companies that acted even
Mm.
with incomplete
Mhm.
information, the employees and their results from a financial standpoint fared much better than those that sat and waited.
Mhm.
And I believe that this is very relevant. Sometimes you just have to act in a testing capacity. You just
Yes.
have to move forward.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that signals strength in itself is the
Mhm.
more that you wait, the more that you hem and haw. And I'm going to be brave enough to say many times when you're him and hawing and you're deciding if you want to bring it up, I think it's because you believe that it is true, but you
But
don't know what to do about
you're
it.
afraid of it,
Yes,
right?
you're very afraid of
And
it.
that's superhuman too, to be afraid of, God, if this is a problem, now I got to fix it. Right?
Yes.
Now I have to figure out what to do about it. And maybe I don't have time for that. Maybe I'm not sure how. Maybe that feels like a distraction from whatever these other pieces are. But that's also why testing is such an important way to be able to dip a toe into something.
Right.
I think so often, and maybe I'll speak mostly from an HR standpoint, I think from HR, because we feel like we need to add value, because we need to
We're
show up,
always trying to add value.
right?
That's we should wear t-shirts that say
I'm
I'm here to add value.
But like we want to add value, so we want to take up space,
Yeah.
right? And this goes back to a bit of the productivity, but as HR practitioners, it's like, give me a seat at the table. I'm going to take up space at that table. And one of the ways that I think we end up taking space up in maybe not always in a value add way is by building these big programs.
Yeah.
And I've noticed with a lot of my clients a hesitancy to lean into the testing and to say, we're just going to pilot this in one small
Right.
area of the business because it doesn't feel present enough. It doesn't feel big enough, right? And we're trying to have
Mm.
this, like, I got to show my value. I got to take up space. And the only way we can do that is by doing this giant program that's been
Global.
global, defined
Yes.
by all the data in the world,
Right.
right? And so I think giving ourselves a bit of permission and encouraging each other to say, it's okay to show value in one small part of the
Yes.
organization and then figure out how to scale, because that also provides you the data that you need to make a bigger decision about an investment.
If I was a CEO, I would demand
Mhm,
pilots. I mean,
mhm.
I would demand pilots. And some of the best organizations that you and I have worked in, the executive team celebrates
Yes,
pilots.
yes.
And I want to build on what you just said. And this is about the reframe too, is stop saying you're innovative if you're risk averse.
Oh,
And because innovation to me is exactly what
It
we're
is.
talking about.
Mhm.
And I'm going to say this, and I probably will get flack for this, but I have not read one company website lately who doesn't have innovation as a value. So, quite frankly, everybody should be piloting things.
Everybody should be piloting
Everybody
things.
should.
Everybody should be moving faster than they are. But here's the thing, you end up in these organizations that have become extremely complex, right? And
Yeah.
so this idea of, now we're kind of getting on a slightly different topic, but in order to innovate, the reality of needing to work through and
All
navigate
the
all these
governance.
governance and layers of the organization, it is actually very difficult. I think a lot of organizations do want to be more
Mhm.
innovative, but the layers create this like system that feels very hard for innovation to thrive, which again, I'm going to go back to the shift and the reframe is then don't try to be innovative everywhere.
Who created the layers?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Be
Yes.
innovative in the spaces where you can be innovative where it can thrive.
Yeah.
I participated in this seminar recently by a professor at MIT, Otto Schwarma, and he's created with another person something called the Presencing Institute, and it's all about the emerging future. It's
Okay.
like all about this idea of mixing strategy with sensing and how do we piece these two things together. And he has something called islands of coherence that he
Mm.
talks about because he lectures on the complexity of big systems. And his idea is rather than trying to break or change or shift the entire system, build your islands of coherence. And I think that's what these testing places
Ah,
are. That's what
yes.
these like areas of innovation. You don't always have to do everything for the whole organization.
Right.
You don't always have to have perfect data in order to make a decision for a scaled program. You can do things in small spaces and create these islands of coherence that then start to ripple,
Yes.
right? Like allow a bit of an
Yes.
organic space for this to exist.
Yes, I love that, and I think that we've covered a lot of, reframes and
Mhm.
different ways of doing this. I'm actually really excited in what our listeners have to say about this
Yeah.
because I believe data is kind of like the gamification of L&D. Is I was like, we got to gamify
Yeah.
everything, and now it's like, and HR needs a seat at the table. They need data, and
Peer-to-peer learning.
nothing but data, and so I think we're all dealing with this, and I do think
Yeah.
it's an issue, and for all of us who, a lot of our listeners are human centered and have really deep intuition that's played out in
Mhm.
powerful ways. And so
Mhm.
I think we, again, we aren't here to solve it. We talked about some really meaningful shifts, and we'd love to hear from
Yep.
our listeners too of what some of those shifts are as you're navigating, augmented
Yeah.
data to your intuition or to your observations. You're also having conversations. Remember, good old
Little
conversations.
conversations, just understanding people. So find us on LinkedIn, share your stories, and let us know how and if this resonated with you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.